Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. That transfer portal window winding down. Many of y'all who've been rocking with the fellas for a while know what that means. We start turning our attention to the high school recruiting trail and largely kind of just getting some early discussions of what this 2026 cycle is going to look like for the Oregon Ducks. Now, I want to start with this. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, wasting no time building a strong 2026 class already, and you got 10 commitments in the fold, 8 of which are top 200 nationally ranked players. It is by far the number one class in the country at this point. And from what it sounds like, Oregon is not slowing down anytime soon. You look at how this 2026 cycle is shaking out early for Oregon. To me, it certainly looks like it could be the best class in the country come signing day in 12 months. Now, I want to get into some names that will be on campus for the Oregon Ducks over the weekend, hosting what is a massive junior day visit. We're not going to talk about every single player that's on campus because I still got to study a lot of these cats. But from the guys that I've worked through, I want to talk about some of the names that will be on campus before we get into it. As always, the Oregon Duck fans, the amount of support y'all showed during the season was amazing. Many of y'all carry that support into what we do on the recruiting trail. We can't thank you guys enough. Many of y'all know following the recruiting trail is something I love to do during the off season. The amount of support y'all continue to show, it means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And from what it sounds like, and I'm no insider, that Oregon Ducks commitment sweatshirt might be coming on at some point over the weekend. Without further ado, let's get into what I think is one of the most fascinating prospects in this 2026 class. Five-star athlete Brandon Arrington going to be on campus for Oregon over the weekend. 6'2", buck 80, 10.4 in the 100-meter dash. This is legitimately one of the fastest players that you're going to see in this 2026 cycle, and he's all a 6'2". I mean, let's start with that. When we're talking about kids who are juniors, sometimes the height, weight metrics don't necessarily match up with what you see on the film. Brandon Arrington probably north of 6'2" at this point. I mean, he is big, he is long, and he offers some position versatility, right? He could be a very good wide receiver, could be a very good boundary cornerback. I personally like him most as a boundary cornerback, and that is because when you turn on the film, he is so comfortable. One, he's bigger than almost any single wide receiver that he's trying to cover, and he's faster than them too. And you look at Oregon and say, all right, how does Oregon get over the hump here? You got to have athletes that can match the athletes of Ohio State and of teams like Texas. Brandon Arrington is that caliber of dude. Now you look at the wide receiver film and say, look, he could be a great wide receiver. You can't go wrong adding this kid to your program and just kind of figuring out the rest later. To me, seems a little bit one-dimensional right now as a route runner, just kind of a 6'2" burner vertically. And look, I'm not saying he can't become a more well-rounded wide receiver. It's not all that rare that we're talking about juniors that have a limited route tree. But to me, what he can do in press man coverage, what he can do running with wide receivers down the field, and because of that wide receiver background, how good he is playing the football in the air, I look at him and say this could be one of the best cornerbacks in the country. That's where I've been most impressed with his film. But at the end of the day, we say this all the time. Y'all are probably sick and tired of hearing me say it. 6'2", 180, 10.4 in the 100-meter dash. Football is a size speed game. You go get big players who can run real fast, and you can figure out the rest later. Brandon Arrington is that kind of guy. Number 2 on the list, and I think this is a big one. And I don't know, look, it's going to be hard. They're pulling a 5-star linebacker from the state of Georgia. Tyler Atkinson is exactly what Oregon needs at that linebacker spot. You talk about another position where it felt like Oregon, from an athletic standpoint, probably was not quite there. It was at the off-ball linebacker spot. You go back to that Rose Bowl and look at Ohio State getting to the perimeter, testing these Oregon linebackers in terms of can they go sideline to sideline, can they operate in space. Having athletic linebackers in this era of college football is extremely important, because you look at opposing offenses, it is, we're going to get our speed in space. Can you run with us? Can you tackle us in open space? If you have linebackers that might be really good in a phone booth, might be really good between the tackles, but can't operate in space, you're going to get picked on. And you look at Tyler Atkinson, 6'2", 205, flies around the football field. This is a linebacker that you want in this modern era of college football and offers you a tremendous amount of versatility, almost kind of like Harold Perkins-ish. You look at Tyler Atkinson, primarily plays off-ball linebacker, really good in those run and chase situations, but on some of those third and longs, he'll just come off the edge. And he is an elite pass rusher as well. And we all know Dan Lanning, Tosh Lupoy, they want to get aggressive in terms of how they're using these linebackers. Really good fit and kind of the caliber of athlete that I think Oregon is looking for at that off-ball linebacker position. You go back to some of his numbers, like as a true freshman down there in the state of Georgia in Grayson, 112 tackles as a true freshman. Incredible number for Tyler Atkinson. Next one I want to go to, and this is another what I think is really impressive off-ball linebacker from the state of California, and it sounds like Oregon's probably the leader in the clubhouse for this one, Tona Illy. You turn on the film for him, and again, you talk about athletic linebackers that can close space exceptionally well. He certainly falls under that category. Tremendously versatile, too. We talked about Tyler Atkinson playing off-ball linebacker, coming off the edge. Illy does all that stuff, too. You'll see him play nickel as well and be really good in coverage. His ability to play in space, again, this is seemingly what Dan Lanning in Oregon is really starting to value in their linebackers. Yeah, we want big physical linebackers, but we need big physical linebackers that can operate in space. Guys like Tona, guys like Tyler Atkinson, they can do that kind of thing for Oregon. Another name that I think is this one is going to be really fun to watch for a couple of different reasons. One, you talk about the landscape of college football. It's no secret that Oregon, Ohio State, they're going to be two of the top teams in the country for the next 5 to 10 years. These kind of recruiting battles are massive. Like when you have the ability to say, hey, not only are we adding an elite 5-star wide receiver, but we're preventing that from being on Ohio State. Massive storyline. Now, Chris Henry Jr. is committed to Ohio State. He transferred back out to California at Mater Dei. That puts Oregon in a prime position to flip this kid. Now, you look at Chris Henry Jr., it's going to be hard to flip wide receivers from Ohio State because you look at all the success they're having with wide receivers, it's hard to argue. But if there is a team that seems to be that team that could flip Chris Henry, it's probably Dan Lanning and the Oregon Ducks. This kid is incredibly impressive, just an athletic specimen to start with, right? 6'5", 200-plus pounds. You kind of assume he's just a contested catch machine, which he is. Like when that football is in the air, his size, physicality, body control, it's all elite. How he moves for that size, it is special. It's hard to argue that Chris Henry is not the best wide receiver in this 2026 class. Oregon's going to have no shortage of really special kids at wide receiver over the next couple of years, most notably someone like DeCorian Moore. I look at Chris Henry and say, this would be another one of those. It's hard to see him not being an immediate impact guy for wherever he goes in the college football landscape. And again, if you can keep him off that Ohio State roster, that's another plus. The last guy I'll talk about here, and I just studied him this morning, Blaine Bradford from the state of Louisiana. What's intriguing about him is I think he could play off-ball linebacker. You know, at 6'1", 200 pounds, and we'll kind of see how his body matures throughout the rest of his junior year and senior year. But he's a big kid for that safety position and lacks zero physicality coming up and tackling. And we talk about Oregon and their emphasis in getting really athletic linebackers. And I think he has the frame at 6'1" plus to get up to 230 pounds. And you look at him playing linebacker, his ability to operate in coverage, his ability to come up and tackle in space, that would make a lot of sense too. And at the end of the day, we're just betting on another really good athlete. And so Oregon, who it's probably worth pulling up where they sit right now in the 2026 class. I mean, you have the number one class in the country. You got 8 kids in the top 200 nationally. It's already going to be a really strong class for Oregon. This is one of those classes you look at and say, there's a very real shot that it could be the number one class in the country come signing day in 12 months. We'll see how much traction Oregon can get. Again, it's one of the hottest teams in the country. You look at all the teams that are emerging in college football, Oregon certainly being one of them. I don't know if there's a program that has more pull right now with these kids at the high school ranks than Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks. Clearly going in the right direction. Clearly going to be a program that, one, is spitting out a ton of NFL talent, but competing for national championships on a yearly basis. We'll see how Oregon can close in 2026, and this is the storyline. Dan Lanning continuing to fill that high school pipeline and stack those classes with just elite caliber dudes. That's how you get to where Oregon wants to go, and they're certainly doing it on the recruiting trail. It's not always fun to talk about recruiting when there's no football for the next 8 months. These are the weekends you go win national championships. Now, you got to put it on the football field, but if you want to give yourself a chance to win a national championship, you got to get it done on the recruiting trail. Dan Lanning knows that more than anybody else. They're certainly doing so. We'll close it out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.